I was standing in a supermarket the other day. It was just an ordinary Thursday. The lights were bright, almost too bright. Music was playing, a song I didn't recognize but felt like I'd heard 1,000 times before. Around me, people were pushing carts, their faces lit by the glow of their phones. They were scrolling through news feeds, checking messages, comparing prices on an app. Everyone seemed so busy, so connected to something far away, yet completely disconnected from the person standing right next to them. I looked at the shelves, stacked high with food from every corner of the world. Avocados from Mexico, coffee from Ethiopia, cheese from France. It was a miracle of logistics, a testament to human ingenuity, but it also felt strangely hollow. A deep sense of confusion washed over me. We have all this, I thought. We have everything. So why does it feel like something is fundamentally broken? This feeling is not unique to me. It is a quiet hum beneath the surface of modern life. We see it in the headlines that scream of division and crisis. We feel it in our workplaces where we are asked to be more productive, more efficient, but rarely more human. We sense it in our communities, which are often just collections of houses rather than networks of people who truly know and support one another. We have built a world of incredible complexity, a system of systems designed for perpetual growth. Yet for all our progress, we seem to be walking in circles, chasing a horizon that keeps moving further away. We are told to be optimistic, to believe in the power of technology and innovation to solve our problems. But a nagging question remains. What if the problem isn't our technology, but the blueprint we are using to build our world? It's as if we were given a map to a beautiful destination, but somewhere along the way we got distracted. We started focusing on the quality of the paper, the elegance of the font, the precision of the lines. We became experts in cartography. We debated the map's every detail, tore it into pieces to give everyone their own small section, and then started fighting over which piece was the most important. In our obsession with the map itself, we forgot its purpose. We forgot that it was meant to guide us somewhere real, somewhere better. We are now a society of expert map readers, lost in a forest of our own making, holding torn fragments of a plan we no longer understand. The destination, the real purpose of our journey, has been almost entirely forgotten. This confusion is the great paradox of our time. We are more connected than ever, yet we report record levels of loneliness. We have more information at our fingertips than any generation in history, yet we are increasingly polarized and misinformed. We have created immense wealth, yet we are witness to staggering inequality and environmental degradation. It is easy to feel powerless in the face of such contradictions. It is easy to believe that this is just the way things are. But history tells a different story. It tells us that we have been here before. This feeling of being lost is not new. It is an echo of a cycle that has repeated for millennia. And by understanding that cycle, by looking back at the blueprints of the past, we might just find the way forward. Let's go back, way back, before the noise, before the empires, before the endless scroll. Imagine the first human settlements blossoming from the fertile earth. These were not just random collections of huts, they were expressions of a profound understanding. The people who built these places knew things we have forgotten. They understood the rhythms of the seasons, the language of the stars, the intricate web of life that connected them to every plant and animal. Their knowledge was not stored on servers or in libraries. It was woven into their stories, their rituals, their daily lives. It was a practical wisdom, born from thousands of years of observation and a deep, abiding respect for the world that sustained them. This was the original blueprint. It was simple. Live in balance, take only what you need, care for the earth and care for each other. This blueprint was powerful. It allowed small bands of hunter-gatherers to evolve into thriving communities. They built cities aligned with the cosmos, created art that celebrated the sacredness of life, and developed systems of agriculture that worked with nature, not against it. Knowledge was a shared resource, a tool for the well-being of the entire community. The goal was not accumulation, but sustainability. It was not about dominating the world, but about finding one's place within it. For a time, This worked. Humanity flourished under a code that valued cooperation over competition and community over the individual. The blueprint was a guide to living a good life, not just for oneself, but for the generations that would follow. It was a promise made to the future, written in starlight and stone. But then something shifted. A dangerous idea took root. The knowledge that had been used to foster harmony began to be seen as a tool for power. The ability to predict the seasons, to manage water, to organize labor. These skills could be used to control others. A new kind of leader emerged, one who saw knowledge not as a gift to be shared, but as a weapon to be wielded. They began to hoard information, to create hierarchies, to convince people that they alone held the secrets to survival and prosperity. This was the moment the blueprint was corrupted. The focus shifted from collective well-being to individual gain. Love, the binding agent of the original plan, was replaced with fear. Fear of scarcity, fear of outsiders, fear of the gods who could only be appeased by the new ruling class. The result was predictable. The cities that were once marvels of cooperation became engines of exploitation. Walls were built not just to keep enemies out, but to keep people in. Grand temples were constructed not to honor the sacred, but to display the power of the few who ruled. The knowledge of the stars was used to create calendars of control, dictating when to plant and when to pay tribute. The very tools that had enabled human flourishing were turned against humanity itself. The delicate balance was broken. Societies became top-heavy, brittle, and unjust. They expanded too far, consumed too much, and eventually they collapsed under the weight of their own ambition. The first great warning from history was written, and the lesson was clear. Knowledge without love is a path to ruin. When these first great civilizations crumbled, it must have seemed like the end of the world. The great monuments fell into ruin. The sophisticated systems of governance dissolved into chaos. The accumulated knowledge seemed to vanish like smoke. But here is the crucial point, the one we so often miss. The blueprint was not destroyed, it was buried. It survived, not in the grand libraries of kings or the stone tablets of priests, but in the hearts and minds of ordinary people. It lived on in the folk tales told by a grandmother to her grandchildren. It was preserved in the simple acts of kindness between neighbors. It was hidden in the quiet resilience of farmers who still knew how to read the land and the sky, not for power but for sustenance. The essence of the blueprint is, after all, remarkably simple. It is the innate human tendency toward cooperation and mutual aid. We are, by our very nature, social creatures. We are hardwired to help each other, to share, to form bonds of trust. This is our evolutionary advantage. It is what allowed our fragile, furless ancestors to survive in a world full of predators. This fundamental truth, that we are better together, cannot be erased by the fall of an empire or the burning of a library. It is a part of our DNA. So, while the grand structures of power disappeared, the foundation of human decency remained. It was waiting patiently for a chance to re-emerge. The knowledge of how to build a just and compassionate society was never truly lost, only temporarily obscured by the dust of fallen ambition. Think of it like a hardy seed buried under a layer of asphalt. On the surface, all you see is the cold, hard, artificial layer. It seems impenetrable. But underneath, the seed is still alive. It holds the potential for a towering tree. All it needs is a crack in the surface, a little bit of sunlight, a drop of rain. Throughout history, the asphalt of power, the greed, the control, the hierarchies, has repeatedly covered the soil of our shared humanity. Yet again and again, cracks appear. People find ways to connect, to help one another, to remember the old ways. They form small, resilient communities that operate on principles of trust and reciprocity, often right under the noses of the powerful. These are the keepers of the blueprint. This is not a story of heroic kings or brilliant generals. It is a story of quiet persistence. It is the story of the village that shares its harvest in a time of famine. It is the story of the stranger who offers shelter during a storm. It is the story of the healers who pass down their knowledge of medicinal plants from one generation to the next. These are not the events that make it into the official history books, which are so often written by the victors. but they are the most important part of our story. They are the proof that the blueprint for a better world is always with us. It is not a lost relic to be discovered in a forgotten tomb. It is a living truth waiting to be practiced. As humanity recovered from these early collapses, new societies began to rise from the ashes. They were bigger, more organized, and armed with powerful new ideas. Two forces, in particular, shaped this new era: law and religion. On the surface, both offered a path back to the blueprint. Great legal codes were written to establish justice and order, to protect the weak from the strong. Great religions emerged, spreading messages of love, compassion, and universal brotherhood. For a moment, it seemed as if humanity had learned its lesson. We would use these powerful new tools to build a more stable, more equitable world. We would finally get it right. These systems promised to restore the balance that had been lost. The initial promise was immense. Law provided a framework for resolving disputes without violence. It created a sense of shared citizenship, of belonging to something larger than one's own family or tribe. Religion offered a moral compass, a transcendent purpose that could unite millions of people. It gave comfort in times of suffering and provided a powerful narrative about our place in the universe. These systems built hospitals, founded universities, and inspired breathtaking works of art. They were in many ways noble attempts to reconstruct the blueprint on a grander scale. They sought to codify compassion, to legislate kindness, and to build institutions that would serve the common good. But old habits die hard. The lure of power is a persistent siren song. Slowly but surely the corruption began again. The same pattern repeated, just with new costumes and a more sophisticated script. The law, intended to be a shield for the powerless, was gradually turned into a weapon for the powerful. It became a complex maze of rules and regulations that could be navigated only by the wealthy and the connected. Justice became a commodity, available to those who could afford it. Religion, which began with prophets of love and liberation, was co-opted by institutions of control. The living truth of the original message was frozen into rigid dogma. The focus shifted from inner transformation to outward obedience. Instead of setting people free, it often put them in new, more ornate cages of guilt and conformity. The blueprint's core message of love was twisted into a demand for loyalty to an emperor, a king, or a church. And so the cycle continued. Empires rose and fell, each one convinced of its own unique and eternal destiny. They built magnificent roads, but used them for conquest. They created sophisticated bureaucracies, but used them for taxation and control. They preached a gospel of peace while waging brutal wars in its name. The truth of our shared humanity, the simple, powerful idea in the original blueprint, was once again buried. It was buried under mountains of legal texts, elaborate theological doctrines, and the immense weight of imperial ambition. The world became a battleground of competing truths, each claiming to be the one true path, and each willing to persecute those who disagreed. The new systems had not solved the old problem. They had simply found more efficient ways to organize our divisions. Then came the steam engine, and the factory, and the telegraph. The Industrial Revolution exploded across the landscape, promising a new kind of salvation progress. This was a powerful new story, one that seemed to break the old cycles of rise and fall. It was a story of human ingenuity, of our ability to conquer nature, to eliminate scarcity, and to build a world of unprecedented abundance. The machine was the new Messiah, and efficiency was its gospel. For the first time, it seemed possible to solve all of humanity's problems, not through moral or spiritual change, but through technological innovation. We would not need to become better people. We would simply build better tools. The future looked bright, loud, and incredibly fast. This new age brought undeniable benefits. It produced goods on a scale never before imagined. It powered the growth of cities that dwarfed the capitals of ancient empires. It led to scientific breakthroughs that doubled lifespans and vanquished diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia. A new kind of power emerged, one based not on land or divine right, but on capital and industry. The captains of this new age were inventors, entrepreneurs, and financiers. They were practical people who believed in tangible results. They built railways that stitched continents together and laid cables that allowed messages to cross oceans in an instant. They were creating a new world, one that ran on coal and steel, and they were convinced it was a better one. But under the noise of the pistons and the smoke from the factories, the old pattern was reasserting itself once more. This new power, like all the powers before it, began to corrupt. The pursuit of progress became a pursuit of profit at any cost. The blueprint for a balanced life was deemed inefficient, an obstacle to be overcome. The natural world was no longer seen as a sacred home to be cared for, but as a collection of raw materials to be extracted and consumed. People too became resources. They were no longer members of a community, but cogs in a vast industrial machine, human resources to be managed, measured, and, if necessary, replaced. The bonds of community, already weakened by empires and institutions, were further dissolved by the anonymous, transactional nature of industrial life. The promise of shared abundance turned out to be a mirage. While a few accumulated unimaginable fortunes, the many who toiled in the factories and mines lived in squalor. New kinds of poverty and inequality were created, more systematic and more entrenched than ever before. The very progress that was meant to liberate humanity created new forms of bondage. The air grew thick with pollution, the rivers ran black with waste, and the human spirit was ground down by the relentless, monotonous rhythm of the assembly line. The machine had not brought us back to the original blueprint. It had simply paved over the old path with a new, harder and more unforgiving surface. The truth was buried deeper than ever, under layers of concrete steel and a powerful new myth called progress. And now we arrive at today. Our today. The year is 2025. We have moved beyond the age of steam and steel into the age of silicon and light. We live in the digital world. The promise this time is even grander than the last. It is a promise of total connection, infinite knowledge, and ultimate personalization. The internet, we were told, would be the great equalizer. It would give a voice to the voiceless, democratize information, and create a global village where we could all understand each other better. It would be the tool that finally allowed us to rediscover the blueprint and build a truly connected human family. The new prophets are the tech titans of Silicon Valley, and their gospel is written in code. For a brief shining moment, it seemed like the promise might be real. The early internet had a wild, utopian feel to it. People from different cultures connected in forums and chat rooms, sharing ideas and discovering their common humanity. Social media platforms began as tools to connect with friends and family. Information that was once locked away in elite universities became available to anyone with a connection. It felt like a genuine revolution, a fundamental shift in how human beings could relate to one another. We were building a new kind of public square, one that was open to everyone everywhere all the time. It was a thrilling prospect. This time we thought this time it will be different. But the pattern is relentless. The siren song of power, now disguised as engagement and data, began to play its tune. The open, decentralized web was gradually enclosed by a handful of massive platforms. These platforms discovered that the most profitable emotions are not love, curiosity, or compassion. They are anger, fear, and outrage. The algorithms, designed with the single-minded goal of maximizing user engagement, learned to feed us a steady diet of content that would provoke and divide us. Our attention became the new raw material, mined and sold to the highest bidder. We were no longer users of a service, we became the product. The dream of a global village devolved into a reality of digital tribes, each trapped in its own self-validating echo chamber, each convinced of the idiocy or malice of the other tribes. And so we find ourselves in a familiar place with a new kind of caste system. It is not based on birth or wealth, but on data profiles and algorithmic sorting. We are divided into filter bubbles, demographic targets, and psychographic segments. The very tools that were meant to connect us are now used to drive us apart, to amplify our differences and to monetize our discord. The digital world, which promised to be a space of liberation, has become for many a source of anxiety, comparison, and profound loneliness. The blueprint, The simple truth of our shared humanity and our need for genuine connection has been buried yet again. This time it lies beneath a mountain of clicks, likes, shares, and a ceaseless, overwhelming flood of digital noise. This is where the story usually ends, with a warning, a prediction of collapse. The cycle seems unbreakable, the forces of division too powerful. And it is true that we are standing at a precipice. The crises we face today, ecological, social, spiritual, are the culmination of this long history of forgetting. If we continue on this path, if we allow the algorithms of division and the economics of extraction to write our future, the outcome is grim. The pattern suggests that the next collapse will be on a global scale, a failure of a system that has become too complex, too unequal, and too disconnected from the living world it depends on. This is not hyperbole. This is the logical conclusion of the path we are on. It is a stark and necessary warning, but this is not the only possible future, because the blueprint is still there. It is buried, yes, but it is not dead. And all around the world, there are cracks appearing in the pavement. A quiet revolution is underway. It is not being televised. It will not trend on social media. It is happening in the small places, in the spaces between the noise. It is happening when a group of neighbors decides to turn a vacant lot into a community garden, sharing the work and the harvest. It is happening when a teacher decides to spend less time on standardized tests and more time teaching empathy and critical thinking. It is happening when a programmer quits their high-paying job to build open-source tools that connect people without exploiting them. These are the keepers of the blueprint today. They are not waiting for a new leader or a new technology to save them. They are simply remembering what it means to be human. They are choosing connection over consumption. They are building resilience in their local communities. Look closely, and you will see them everywhere. It is the Repair Cafe, where people fix their broken things instead of throwing them away. It is the food co-op that chooses to support local farmers over multinational corporations. It is the simple, radical act of putting down your phone and having a real conversation with the person in front of you. These are not grand gestures. They are small, deliberate acts of remembering. They are the seeds of a different kind of world sprouting in the ruins of the old one. So what does this all mean? It means we are not doomed to repeat the cycle. We have a choice. We can continue to scroll through our personalized cages, feeding the algorithms of division, or we can start to build something else. Imagine for a moment a man in a sleek business suit, sitting in a board meeting, presenting a detailed slideshow on synergizing proactive community-building paradigms for Q4. He talks about engagement metrics and incentivization funnels. The room nods sagely. Meanwhile, outside the window, 2 floors below, an old woman is showing a young kid how to properly plant a tomato seedling. She's not synergizing a paradigm. She's just planting a tomato. She's teaching him something real. She is passing on the blueprint. That, right there, is our hope. It is in the soil, not the spreadsheet. It is time to stop analyzing the map and start walking the path. Together.